What's up guys, today I'm going to show you the water-cooled PC build which I finally got around to doing. This dates back a while now, back to when I did that video on the AMD CPU showdown where I tested 4 of the FX AMD CPUs. If you haven't seen that video, go check it out. Now the biggest problem I had after installing the 9590 is the fact that it is basically a space heater. It puts off so much heat, not even the all-in-one water cooling setup that I had connected to it was good enough. So it kept on overheating and eventually the computer would shut down. We had all those issues, which you can even see when I'm playing some games, it just drops out. So back in October of 2018, I started to put together this video, which I was going to do a water cooling setup with the existing computer case that I had. It was quite complex and I had to actually have the radiator which would be mounted underneath the computer case. So I had hoses coming out of the computer, going down underneath the table and back up again. So after a while I kind of scrapped that and then I ended up buying this new case, which was the Thermaltake Core P5 with the tempered glass, and it is a wall mounted computer. I didn't end up wall mounting it at this stage, but this computer is designed to have plenty of space for radiators, pumps, and everything you need. But first, what we need to do is pull apart the old computer case. Now I'm just going to pull out all the parts that I can, and I'm going to see what I can reuse. Now, the parts that I don't want to use anymore is obviously the cooling system that was in the old computer case, and also the graphics cards, which I can replace with water-cooled graphics cards. By doing this, I'm trying to minimize the amount of airflow that I'm going to be circulating around components and actually water cooling as much as possible. That way I can actually filter one set of fans, and then that's all I need to filter out and clean as I go down the track. Now that I have all these parts pulled out of the old computer case, I can go and clean all the dust off all the parts because I don't want to put any of that dust into the new system. But essentially everything that I pull out of here I'm going to try and reuse, and then the case which I'm going to finally get rid of, which I've been using for probably 14 years now. So the first thing I'm going to do is attach the bracket for the PCI card. Once that's completed, I can then attach the motherboard. So I'm just going to attach it in the normal position. You can also have it mounted facing up, but I'm not going to do it in this setup. Finished, I can attach the CPU into the socket, and then I can put on the thermal paste, and then we can attach the CPU cooler, which is a EK block. Now I can't give you the specifics of all the components on this build because a lot of them are secondhand, which I bought really cheap, so I don't know everything about them. After that's installed, I can attach the power supply unit, which has its own bracket. Next I have two R9 290X graphics cards which have those water cool blocks on them as well. I'm going to slot those in, screw them on to the PCI bracket. Now on the back is where we install the hard drives. Now on this case there's not enough room for all the hard drives, so I'm just going to rig something up myself. In future I might 3D print up a bracket to hold these hard drives better, but for the moment I'm just cable tying it and it works, so that's good enough for me. Then we have to run all the cables through to connect to the motherboard. Now this ended up being a very tedious task. I had to continually connect things, disconnect it, just to run it through. Now if you were just using the standard setup with a few hard drives and maybe not 2 graphics cards, it'd be a bit easier to run stuff through. But because of all the stuff I had connected, running the cables was a bit of a nightmare. But we got there eventually, so that's the main thing. So I'm going to delete out a lot of the footage that I had because I don't think you need to see me struggle with these cables for about half an hour. So I'm just going to skip to the end where I've got everything connected. And next thing I'm going to do is start with the radiator. So this radiator is actually quite large, a 4x120mm, which allows for both fans to be connected on the front and back for a push and pull, but I'm only just going to do the pull method at the moment, and basically from the other side I'll screw through the case and onto the radiator. Now making sure I use as many screws as I can, because once this radiator fills up with water it's going to have quite a bit of weight in it. So that's done, I can attach the reservoir / pump that I have, and then I can start attaching all the fittings, which I'm using a combination of barb fittings and also the compression, just because of what's attached already for those compression fittings. Now what I'm going to do is run it from the radiator into the reservoir, which then goes into the pump, pumps up into the first graphics card, and then that goes into the second graphics card, into the CPU, then from the CPU into the other side of the radiator again, and that completes that flow. Now this time I have made sure to put in a drain if I need to drain any of the fluid later on, and I'll also show you later on in the video where I actually have a fill port as well. So now that that's all done, all I have to do is start filling the system with water. So filling the system was fine, and I just continued to add little bits of water at a time just to test that there was also no leaks as well, and everything was running smoothly until about this point here. Someone didn't flush the graphics cards, which as you can see has green fluid in it, which didn't really help when I was trying to keep it clear. So I had to flush the entire system out, and yeah, that was not fun, considering I didn't have that much distilled water left, and is part of the reason why this video took so long. So yes, there's about another half an hour of me trying to flush this system, which I'm going to cut out. FYI, don't try and flush your system the way I did. I just did it because I was trying to minimize the amount of water loss that I had, but yeah. So once I ended up flushing this system out and I ended up getting some more water, you can still see there is that stain or that type of color throughout the water because I didn't get everything out. I'm not fussing about it too much. I'm just going to continue on with the build, and down the track I might flush the entire system or even add in a certain color coolant if I feel like changing it up. Now I'm adding on 4 of these 120mm fans, which they are the Cooler Master Jet Flow, so they actually have quite a bit of CFM compared to most other fans, and I'm connecting that up to a distribution board or a little switch that actually reduces the voltage on those fans, so I can switch between off, full speed at the 12 volts, and then a second speed which I believe is about 7 volts, which does make the fans a lot quieter and is what I use as the normal day-to-day usage, and that way I don't hear the computer screaming at me the entire time. Now let's hear it with the fans on full speed. And at the normal operation speed. So now that that's done, I'm going to install a filter on the back of this radiator, which will stop a lot of the dust going through and clogging up the radiator, which is what we don't want. Now there's also a filter that I've placed on the outside of the case where the air gets sucked in, and then there's also a magnetic filter on the other side of the case backing. So I've actually got 3 filters that are stopping any dust that's going in, so hopefully it keeps the system nice and clean, and I only have to clean out filters every now and again. So now the system's all built, I've got it all put together, I can put it in place and test it out, and we can check out how hot this thing gets. Alright, so we do get a little bit of air in the system, which Did take me a while to try and get most of it out, and what I ended up coming up with was a different fitting situation on the top, but I'll show you that in a minute. I'm going to go to what probably most of you clicked on this video for, which is the thermal camera setup of being able to show the heat that's actually dissipating throughout this system and how hot it actually gets. So this footage is basically the system heating up, and I've actually turned on a game to let it run just to try and actually push that CPU. Now, most of the time when I was doing this without the water cooling setup, it would actually crash because it would overheat and go over 60 degrees and then automatically shut off. But what I have here is the radiator just dissipating that heat. Now there's no fans running. You can tell because you would see, and you'll see further on down the track, the motor doesn't generate any heat where those fans are, where you'll see that when I turn the fans on later on. So over a bit of time, the computer does heat up a little bit, but it doesn't actually get that hot. And what I actually worked out is that if I was just doing normal day-to-day stuff, I don't even need to run the fans, because the water circulating through the system and going through the radiator is actually enough to just get rid of enough heat that the computer's not actually going to overheat at all and cause any issues. So when I'm actually pushing it a lot harder, I can turn the fans on and it actually keeps the temperature at quite a reasonable range, even though it's pushing quite hard. Now, I didn't actually do any testing with any CPU testers to actually push it as hard as I can, which I can do that down the track if people are interested. But as you can see there, the hottest component on the actual computer now is the Northbridge heat sinks and the VRMs, which obviously heat up and they need those big heat sinks there. But down the track I might even water cool them, and hopefully we can keep the system even cooler. So I'm about to cut the footage in a minute to when I turn on the fans to be full ball and try and dissipate as much heat. So keep an eye out for where those fans are. You'll see now that they're actually starting to heat up and generate heat, which obviously happens because the fan's spinning, but you'll see that the temperature does drop off a little bit in those lines, and also the radiator itself starts to cool down. So considering this is the world's hottest CPU so far, I'm pretty happy with how I'm dissipating the heat with this water cooling setup. Now, as you can see, the fitting on the top I've actually had to change, and it's actually made it easier to get air out of the loop as well. Now that I've fixed all the overheating issues, I can go back to editing more videos, get some more videos out there for you guys. So if you like this video, make sure you hit that like, make sure you subscribe for more videos like this. And thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.